Today on Pilot's Discretion, we're joined by pilot and Cub builder Clay Simmons. He talks about young pilots, growing the aviation community, and backcountry flying. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Hi everyone, I'm John Zimmerman, and thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion from Sporties. Visit sporties.com/podcast for today's show links and access to our archives, where you can listen to every episode of Pilot's Discretion. Also, we'll be releasing a special 100th episode soon, and we'd love to hear your comments or questions for that show. Send us an email at podcast@sporties.com, and we'll try to answer some listener questions during that 100th episode. Today, my guest is Clay Simmons, a young pilot who already has a very impressive resume. He's currently an aircraft sales associate at Arista, a well-known aircraft broker, but he also built a Carbon Cub at age 22. He works with the Recreational Aviation Foundation, and last year he won first place in the Richard Collins Writing Prize for Young Pilots. This is an annual contest sponsored by Sporties and Airfax, where first place wins a $5,000 award, and the 2025 edition just kicked off. So we'll put a link in the show notes, and I would encourage all young pilots to participate. Clay, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be on here and get the chance to preach a little bit about what I care about to an incredible audience. And more importantly, thank you for taking the time to let me preach.
Well, let's get the preaching going, because I think you may be the youngest guest we've had on Pilot's Discretion. So I want to talk about young pilots. In particular, I'm hoping maybe you can bust some myths about kids these days, as they say, maybe give some of our older listeners hope that aviation is in good hands. So for someone like me, even I learned to fly in the mid-1990s. How are today's young pilots different? What are their expectations or their hopes or their concerns that longtime pilots should know if they meet a young pilot these days?
I think there's a couple things that are different. And the first is something we see everywhere in every realm, which is technology. If you were to have learned to fly in the 70s or 80s, the levels of technology you had access to back then just aren't the same as what they are now. And I think what's made flying more accessible lately is this massive access to information, whether that's Sporties online or pilotinstitute.org. There's so many resources that you can do from the comfort of your own home, and accessing information has never been easier. Now, as it pertains to the actual aircraft themselves, the technology is also improving. It's making flying safer and easier. And I think that some of the stigmas that exist around aviation, not that long ago, don't really exist anymore. And it's encouraging for a lot of young people to get into something that was once seen as kind of inaccessible to be a lot more relatable with that technology, with the increase in safety. And on a personal note, just seeing kids at the airport. I think there are more kids at the airport. I was one of those kids growing up at the airport. Whenever I'm down and have my plane out, whether it's working on it or washing it, people want to talk about it. And a lot of the time it's young kids that see me. I've been so lucky to have so many incredible people in my corner, but they see me working on an airplane and see themselves as wanting to be in that position. And I'll always take the 5 minutes to chat with them about how I got there and what I do. And it's really, really encouraging. I think there's a massive blossom right now, if you will, of kids that want to learn how to fly.
I've seen that myself, and you're so right about the snowball effect of seeing other young people at the airport. I mean, the FAA stats back this up. The latest FAA Airman report, 41% of active student pilots are under age 30. That's 130,000 people.
Such a fantastic statistic.
25% of private pilots are under age 30. So there's just, the numbers are starting to show up there. So I hear you on technology, and I agree with you on technology. But let me take a somewhat contrarian stance. Is there almost the opposite, in a sense, of the aviation industry is a reaction to the overly online world we live in today? Is there something also that's refreshing about, we read about slow cooking, slow travel, things like this. Is there something there with aviation that requires hands-on? It requires being in person. It requires working with other people. It's not instant gratification. Is that just some old man yelling at the cloud here, or is there a shred of something there?
I think both of those statements can be true at once. I think they're absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. There is something valuable about being present in aviation. It's a very hands-on activity. And in the same breath as, I'm preaching about technology and how it's benefiting aviation so much, it is still disconnecting from your phone in a way, right? You're not scrolling social media. You're not playing video games. By some metrics, it's a video game in real life, which is fascinating that I use that analogy as opposed to the opposite of that. But there's something pure about it, right? Whether it's the 152 or the J3, that's an incredibly simple airplane. There's something pure about that. And I think that's another reason why people are interested in it, is because it's an escape from what day-to-day life might look like. So I think what you said can be true as well as what I said being true at the same time.
And what can the aviation industry at large do to better connect with young pilots and more than just inspire them to like airplanes and aviation, but to get them to take the next step? What's going to connect with them and what falls flat? Give us your critique.
This is where the preaching gets to start. Make yourself accessible. It's no secret that aviation is an older industry. All the statistics you mentioned earlier are fantastic. They really are a good thing. But aviation is an older industry. There are barriers to entry that there aren't in other industries that make things a little bit more challenging for the young pilot to get into. Like I said, I've been so incredibly lucky to be in the position I am. I'm a little bit of an anomaly, being 23, navigating the world of airplane ownership and working in the aircraft sales world. I'm bringing down the average age in every room I walk into, which is a fantastic thing. But what I mean by accessibility is there are a lot of people who have airplanes and they use them for travel or just for getting A to B, when the reality is aviation is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. Aviations are how we use to connect, how we interact with people, and all that stuff matters. And it's not just going from, here in Knoxville over to Nashville to be a friend. It's pulling your airplane out of the hangar and letting some kids from the local school crawl around on it a little bit. I don't condone, putting your airplane in a position where it's going to get broken. Don't get me wrong. But being accessible at your local airport, advocating for the next generation, because there's going to come a time when these individuals can't fly. There's going to come a time when the airline pilots age out, and we have to start filling that next gap. I know during COVID, there were some changes to the retirement age of pilots. That stuff is going to matter in the near future. We have to start breeding the next generation of pilots and aviators. And within that little part on its own, more importantly, is the aviator part, right? We don't need robots who plug in direct twos as just pilots. We need aviators. We need people that love flying for flying's sake, love being off the pattern on a Sunday morning. And I think that all starts with accessibility and those that are in a position to share the resources they have, sharing them. So whether it's your EAA chapter or open houses at the airport, I think it's incredibly important to get involved and be involved with the local community to make sure that they see aviation is accessible, it's fun, we're friendly. I would go so far as to say most people are willing to do a discovery flight. It's just a matter of going and doing it, connecting to your EAA chapter and making it happen. So be accessible, stay involved. Those two things cannot be overstated.
It's wonderful advice. And the only thing I'd add is after many years of doing Young Eagles flights, it's every bit as much fun for the adults as it is the kids. So it shouldn't be viewed as if it's work and you're donating your time. It's a heck of a lot of fun too.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad you brought up the fun part, because a lot of times when we talk about young people in aviation, it's on a career track, go fly for the airlines, which is great. And obviously there's a whole new generation of airline pilots that we've welcomed over the last few years. But how about the fun part and just attracting people and keeping people who just appreciate the joy and reward of GA flying? What resonates about that part of it beyond just the career prospects?
Well, I think where it starts is I've been very fortunate to have the chance to speak about aviation as a whole and explain that, to a 5 or a 6-year-old who sees an airplane, typically the only career prospect they think about is a pilot, right? And the reality is there are millions and millions of jobs in aviation that are fueled by airplanes moving A to B, whether that's mechanics, scheduling, logistics, cargo, passenger. I mean, there's so many options to get into aviation, be in aviation. But I think what it all boils down to is a love for planes and the fun part of that. And I'm going to do something that might be seen as heresy, is shout out social media, because on social media, I think there are a couple of people that do a really, really good job of showing the fun side of aviation. There are certainly some individuals who do vlogs and documentaries on YouTube about their business jet travels, but there are also a lot of people that show that aviation is fun. It's a fun way to connect with friends. It's a fun way to get outside. You can access things and see things that the average person will never get the chance to see. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it's a fraction of a percent of all of humankind has ever seen the Earth from above, ground level. And so getting to do something that is such an exclusive club on its own is an incredibly awesome thing, but it's just plain fun. No pun intended.
I couldn't agree more. There's certainly some bad stuff on social media, but it's been a tremendous asset for aviation in general. I think there's no doubt that a whole generation of pilots were introduced through some combination of great YouTube videos and TikToks and everything else. So,
Absolutely.
no doubt.
Absolutely. Social media's done a fantastic job with that lately, with all the fun music and fun effects, showing off what airplanes can do, the communities around them. You look at something like Oshkosh or Sun and Fun, the social media that comes from that. I know everyone that goes to Oshkosh leaves with a re-energized sense of aviation, but I'd like to think those that see the social media element realize that aviation is pretty cool and there are a whole lot of cool people in it.
Is there a risk there with the social media part? Because I sometimes hear people say, I saw this awesome backcountry, I saw 185 landing on a dry riverbed on YouTube, and then I show up and I got to get in a 60-year-old Cessna and fly around the pattern. And obviously you do. There is a training part there you can't skip. But how do we help people sort of manage that piece of it with maybe the gap between the inspiration of seeing it on social media and actually getting to achieve that thing you watched?
I think it starts by setting expectations correctly. This is something that we talk about at Arista a lot, is making sure expectations are set in the right place from the get-go. And I think it applies in a lot of realms. When it comes to social media, making sure that expectations are being set correctly, that the individual you're seeing flying onto a sandbar is not doing that as his second flight in the airplane. He's doing that as his 2000th. So I think it starts with setting expectations correctly, that, hey, there is a process to get to this point. There's a certain airplane it takes to do this. There's a certain set of skills and training you have to go through to be in a position to do that. But it's all certainly feasible, right? If someone's out doing it, whether it's Mike Goulian tumbling through a sky or Citation Max flying a Citation at 45,000 feet, all of those things are achievable by virtue of those individuals doing them. But there's a process that it takes to get there. And using those platforms that these individuals have, I mentioned two right there, but there are thousands more, as a tool for training and understanding of, hey, you see the cool video of me doing this cool thing. Let's talk about the process it takes to get here. That's a fantastic thing. And there are a couple folks that do that really, really well, sharing the awesome part with the reality of how you get there. I think it's all about setting expectations. And once again, getting kids into aviation because of these cool things, those might be the pathways they go on. All of the things you see these incredible pilots doing, they all have a real world use, right? If it's landing on a river bar, low and slow, the real world application is taking hunters in Alaska to remote places to do it. And that's how people make a living. So they're all very real skills you have to use. Now you see the fun side of it, but going through the training, going through the understanding of how to get there is a fantastic thing. And people that use their platforms to do that, chef's kiss to them.
And I would just add, enjoy the struggle, that it's not all about just getting to that goal and doing that flight in that Citation or that backcountry airplane, that learning to fly and the ups and downs, while it can be a slog sometimes, that is actually the greatest reward, is the process, not the thing at the other end of it. And I see too many people kind of rush through that. They're anxious to get to that thing they've been dreaming about, and they forget to enjoy the ride.
Absolutely. There's two kind of pilots. There are those that have had bad days where they really struggled, and liars.
Amen to that. Well, let's talk about your winning entry for the Richard Collins Writing Prize last year. Phenomenal story. We'll link to it in the show notes here. And you wrote about building an airplane, which is fascinating. But I thought the most engaging part was the value of mentors in the aviation community. Your story is not really about an airplane or an airport or even a pilot. It's about, I think, the community and the people and the mentors. So tell us why that's so important and why that makes such a difference, maybe particularly for a young person.
It's impossible to understate the value of getting to interact with people that have more experience than you. I've been very fortunate to be in situations where I get to be the smartest person about a certain thing, but more often than not, it's the other way around. And, we have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. The value of a mentor in aviation is impossible to understate. I cannot sit here without expressing so much gratitude to so many people. We would spend hours if I were to just rattle off every name that has contributed to where I'm at right now. The people that were in my corner for that whole experience were the reason it happened. And that's not to dismiss the work that I put in or my presence in those situations, but specifically Jim Richmond, Jeff Smith, my dad, Todd Simmons, my uncle, Andrew Simmons, them being there and being a part of that. I would say that's the most special part to me is, the friends and the friendship and the love I have for those individuals. Having a mentor is everything. If for a young individual looking to get into aviation, you don't know everything and you won't know everything. You never will. But a pilot's license isn't a finish line. A pilot's license is a starting point. It's a license to learn. It's a license to put yourself in situations where you get to learn, to access more people, to get better at what you do, because you will never be the best pilot. You will never be the best at this, that, or the other. But being around people that are is how you get there. We're never going to achieve perfection, but in the pursuit of it is right where you need to be. And those people, like I said, it's impossible for me to understate the gratitude I have for them. I spent a lot of long nights in the shop with Jess Smith working on that Cub. I mean, there was literally blood, sweat, and tears as it pertains to that. Obviously, my dad, I've known him my whole life, shocker. But he put me in an airplane when I was 10 days old, and I grew up in the backseat bumping around. And he's always been a huge champion of me finding my love for aviation in a different way, letting me do it on my terms, letting me discover it my own way. My uncle Andrew, who is kind of the equal opposite of my dad, he's very much more relaxed. He's a little more laid back, and I go out there to see the backcountry side of things. And obviously Jim Richmond, getting to grow up around him, just one of the few names, the Clapmeyers of the world that understand aviation and understand the engineering and physics of it so innately. Getting to sit around him as a kid, around the fire at Johnson Creek, it's impossible to understate how valuable that stuff is and how it creates the love you have for aviation. So I could go on and on about this forever, but it's incredible.
And what's your advice for a young person who's seeking a mentor like that? I mean, obviously, it depends a little bit on your circumstances. Maybe, the internet helps you make connections, but is it as simple as just reaching out and asking, or do you have other practical tips if a young person is looking for that aviation mentor and doesn't have someone maybe in their family?
All of those above, all the above can be true. I like to live by something, and it occasionally gets me in trouble, but it's a no if you don't ask. And it starts by as simple as a question. Hey, when you go fly, would you mind if I ride along? Hey, when you do an oil change, can I be there with you? And that's how these things start. And the reality is I was incredibly lucky that the mentors were just placed in front of me and I didn't have to hunt for them. But there are some mentors that I have in my life that I did have to work for a little bit. And you network and you connect, be at the airport, go to Oshkosh, go to Sun and Fun, do what it takes to get yourself in front of the people that know more than you do. And aviation is an incredibly welcome community. Odds are pretty good that they're going to be willing to help you, work with you, because I think everyone in aviation has a similar mentality of us being kind of the shepherds for the future. I know that's ironic coming from a 23-year-old because I'm still a kid in most arenas, but I think most people have an obligation to make it better for the next generation. And a lot of people are willing to lean into that. So finding mentors, it's not going to be as hard as you think. Most local airports will have someone. EAA chapters will certainly have one. There's one everywhere. You'll be able to find someone, but lean into those things, lean into the late nights in the hangar, lean into, the early morning flights where you got to get up at 5:30 and go do it. Those kind of things matter. And in the long run, I think that most people that have a job in aviation that didn't otherwise have a connection started because of something like that. Hanging out at the airport, going to the local events, meeting the right person at the right time. The power of a mentor is impossible to understate.
Yeah, the way I had it described to me early on was get more at bats, to use the baseball analogy, right? If you're at the airport event, if you're there, you have more at bats, you have more chances to make that connection.
Fantastic way to put it.
Clay, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about backcountry aviation.
Ready to ace your flight training? With Sporty's pilot training courses, you get free lifetime updates. No extra fees. Ever. New for 2025, we've added aviation-specific AI tools, ChatDPE for real-time exam prep, and Chat FAR to decode tricky aviation regulations. It's more than just test prep. It's smarter, faster learning. Get started today at sportys.com/learn-to-fly. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion.
We are back with Clay Simmons, whose winning story talks about backcountry aviation. Now, Clay, this is a type of flying that is, like we've said, all over social media. Does it attract new pilots in particular, do you think, and young pilots? Is it somehow more just exciting than a $100 hamburger run in a Cessna 172?
I think it can be. I think there's certainly been a little bit of glamorization of what backcountry flying actually is. It's no secret that there are 2 or 3 areas that are far and away better for backcountry flying than most. And you're going to have to kind of schlep your way over there and, in the planes that do well in the backcountry. It's typically a pretty long hike. But there's something special about backcountry flying that it cannot be replicated or replaced. I think it is one of the most beautiful yet demanding forms of flying. You are in valleys, in canyons, often you're below mountain peaks, and there's a certain adrenaline you get knowing you're in a high-risk situation. The flip side of that is you rely on your training, what you know, how you learn, and ultimately ends up being some of the most rewarding flying, accessing, the honey holes of rainbow trout fishing, or, some little ranch in the middle of nowhere that has the best food you'll ever have. Maybe it's the flight in, I don't know. But it certainly has blossomed recently. And I think that new pilots often see it as kind of a first step to aviation, when the reality is it takes some training, it takes some skill. And you can practice these skills and train for these things at your local airport, don't get me wrong. But it is a demanding and hostile environment, and you need to be prepared to do it the right way. That is one thing that I cannot leave out is make sure you do your training. Make sure you do your research on how to do these things. Don't jump straight into Idaho backcountry. I mean, if you're up in the air at 2:00 in the middle of the summer, you're in a pretty tough spot in the Idaho backcountry.
Tell me more about that, because I would hope most listeners know their first backcountry flight should not be solo, and they should, again, plug into that community. So do you find that backcountry pilots are generally welcoming of new pilots? Again, back to this mentor conversation, if I am thinking about making a trip out there, is it easy to get connected with somebody who knows what they're doing?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to be a resource. I'm certainly not an expert, but I've done it a few times. I think welcoming is a strong word, only because there's a certain level of professionalism and skill that it takes. And so knowledgeable, yes. But the reality is backcountry flying takes a certain set of skills of understanding how density altitude is going to affect your airplane, the kind of survival equipment you have to bring, the understanding of box canyons and no-go around strips, and why those things really matter. So welcoming is a strong word, because you'll probably get a couple no's, as in, no, I'm not going to take you back there, or, hey, you should ride along with me, before you ever get the green light to go do it. But there are certainly a lot of people that are super willing to help you understand what the realities of backcountry flying are. And it's perfectly okay to say, hey, this isn't for me. I've grown up doing it. In my story, I wrote about how I grew up going to Johnson Creek and bumping around the back of the Cub. So I've always had a decent understanding of the yeses and nos of backcountry flying. And there are certainly, I don't want to understate it, a lot of resources and videos and people that are willing to help. But welcoming is a cautious word to use, just because the odds are pretty good you're going to get a no before you get a yes, as far as getting into the backcountry in a responsible manner.
And what are those skills that I need to really be sharp on before I venture out there? I mean, how do I know I'm ready? What are the few things I need to just be absolutely perfect on?
All of the above. So I joke about it. I think it's a culmination of every kind of flying. The first is, and it's never fun to talk about what to do when you go down. What kind of survival equipment do you have with you? Are you ready to stay in the middle of nowhere for a week? The survival equipment, whether that's food and water, shelter, emergency, it starts there. You have to be prepared for worst case scenario. The next step is understanding your airplane. There are certain airplanes that just won't do it, and certain airplanes that will. The Carbon Cub is a great example of an airplane that does it very well. It's a good short takeoff and landing airplane. It's light, has great climb performance. But with that being said, that doesn't mean I can hop in a Carbon Cub and immediately take it to the backcountry and think everything's going to be good. I spend a lot of weekends here in Knoxville practicing how low and how slow can I get within my personal limitations for when I'm out in Idaho backcountry and it's a 700-foot strip where I can't go around. And do I know that I can get in there safely? Can I get stopped? Can I get out of the airplane and get back out of the strip on the back end? So knowing your airplane, knowing your speeds, these things matter. Everyone hears CFIs preach, being on the numbers, and they think, oh, what's 5 over, what's 10 over, on a mile final. In the backcountry, you don't have that option. An extra 10 miles an hour on short final could mean you're hitting trees, could mean you're going into the water. And then you've got a whole different set of problems. So I think those are the two big things to start with. And the last thing is understanding how the environment out there looks significantly different than your home airport. Now, if you're in Idaho, that doesn't apply to you. But if you're at a low DA airport on a coast, in the middle of winter, your airplane's going to perform like a hot rod no matter what. But out there, when density altitude frequently reaches 5 digits, and it can be ripping hot in the middle of the day and freezing cold in the middle of the night, and all the mountains create weird wind vortices, and winds can get ripping fast, all that stuff matters. That stuff really comes into play, and it can make a difference in life or death. So understanding the different characteristics of weather as it pertains to the mountains is probably the third element. But once again, I'll revert back to safety being unequivocally the most important part of this, is understanding the safety element of when stuff goes wrong, because, you can't rule it out. It's a dangerous environment. What do you do? That's what matters most back there.
Now, I know you do some work with the Recreational Aviation Foundation. It's a great organization. We've had some folks from the RAF on this show. I know specifically you've worked on their Backcountry Etiquette Committee. So I have to ask, what is Backcountry Etiquette?
I'm glad you asked. So backcountry etiquette as an idea is not rules, but rather guidelines for the backcountry. Backcountry flying is my kind of flying. It's where I'm at peace and at home. And it's hard for us to go preach a certain thing and not live by it. So I do proudly live by these things that I believe in so strongly. But they are guidelines, not rules, for how to operate in the backcountry. And in the short term, it may seem a little bit annoying or frustrating to obey these rules. But in the long run, it's preserving aviation for the next generation. We've had such a great opportunity, us as an aviation community today, to enjoy these incredible spaces. But it's no secret there's a threat to airports and to airplanes all around the country for a variety of reasons. Airports are closing at a rapid rate, airplanes not being produced as fast, and a bunch of other reasons that, it's dwindling, not growing like we'd like it to see. And that's not to be pessimistic about aviation. I'm incredibly optimistic about it. But creating guidelines that people operating in the backcountry can use that really do matter. These beautiful spaces that we get to see from above, they're just as beautiful to people using them in a different way. Whether you're camping, biking, hiking, fishing, they're incredible spaces. We're accessing the same places in a different way and enjoying the same places in different ways. And so there are certain guidelines that we recommend you follow to make sure that it's a very symbiotic relationship between all parties out there. And the RAF is an incredible organization. I keep saying cannot understate, but there are a lot of cool groups that I've had the chance to work with. Cannot understate how awesome they are and what they do as far as backcountry aviation and really the most fun kind of flying there is, which is getting off the grid and getting your $100 hamburger in a different way. You might have to cook it.
All right, Clay, we always end Pilot's Discretion with a lightning round we call Ready to Copy. I'll ask some questions on a variety of topics. You fire back with your quick answer. Are you ready to copy?
Ready to copy.
What was the hardest part of building the Carbon Cub?
Ooh, patience. I was so ready to get that thing in the air. The fact that it was 2 years from the get-go, that was hard. But I wouldn't change for the world.
And many people would say 2 years is quick. So patience maybe times 2 for the average builder.
Subjectively quick. It was the patience part. I was so ready to fly.
What's your favorite thing about that airplane? A performance spec or a design detail or something that's easy to overlook?
That I built it. It's such a pride thing, getting to be in an airport and tell someone, yeah, man, I made this thing come to life. That I built it. It's an awesome airplane top to bottom. It'd be wrong to single out any one feature of it. Best part about it is that I built it with some awesome help. Jeff Smith, you're incredible.
Can you sum up that first flight in an airplane you built in 10 words or less?
10 seconds of pure fear and then an hour of this is the coolest thing I've ever done.
Well done. Pass that test. And what's your advice for a first-time airplane builder, somebody who's thinking about it, hasn't done it before? What is something you would just make sure they know?
Lean in and do it. It is such a rewarding process getting to see your airplane fly for the first time, but enjoy the process. There are a lot of really cool moments and cool steps along the way, and getting to build an airplane that fits your mission and you have effectively unlimited customization of it. It's an incredible process. There's nothing quite like having built it on your own as opposed to a factory building it. Not that the factories are bad, don't get me wrong, but lead into the process. It's an incredible experience and probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
There's a stereotype that kids these days aren't as handy as previous generations. So do you recommend building an airplane for a young person?
Absolutely. I think that especially if you do it with someone who's not a first-time builder and someone who's a little bit veteran as far as their pilot career, that's I would credit Jeff Smith with a lot of the knowledge and experience that I have as it pertains to that subject. I think for both parties, it's invaluable. For the older party, getting a chance to give back to the younger generation of aviators, or the younger generation, getting the chance to interact with someone that's years your senior and has a whole lot more wisdom and understanding. That's an incredibly powerful thing. So yes, get out there, turn a wrench, pull a rivet. It's not that hard, I promise.
What is your best tip for making better landings in a tailwheel airplane?
Be on your numbers. Numbers matter. Coming in too fast on a tail wheel can be catastrophic. It's no secret. Be on your numbers and do that extra flight with the CFI, especially someone who really knows what they're doing. No shame in a go around, but certainly no shame in flying on the CFI.
Outside of Johnson Creek, which you mentioned is in your story, what's your favorite backcountry airstrip?
Morgan Ranch.
How about one east of the Mississippi? You said obviously a lot of the great backcountry flying is in Idaho, Montana. If I can't make it all the way out west, is there some place in the east that gives me some sense of that adventure?
Go to Bentonville, Arkansas. Interact with the folks at Fly Oz. They have 56 strips in the area. I couldn't pick a favorite out of those. I mean, they have some incredible strips with some awesome food, super, super smart instructors that'll tell you exactly how to do all the stuff. Go to Bentonville, stay a couple nights there. It's an awesome little town. It's one of the coolest GA airports in the world. Bentonville, Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, Fly Oz. Those folks are amazing. They've got some really cool stuff going on there.
All right, a question about buying an airplane, something you work on quite often. What is a mistake to avoid when buying an airplane? Maybe especially for a first-time buyer. What's something you wish you could tell that buyer ahead of time?
Talk to some pros. I'm certainly new in my career, but I'm very familiar with Cubs and by extension Cirrus. I know my dad was on this podcast a while ago. Surprise. Talk to some pros. I think buying an airplane as an individual without any understanding of what you're really looking for or what you need or how the airplane transaction process works can be a little bit daunting. And that's what at Arista we're here to help with, whether that's a Cub all the way up through a Vision Jet. Talk to some pros, and we're going to walk you right through the process and make sure you end up in a perfect airplane for you.
All right. We always like to go outside aviation for a couple questions. So I understand you're a little bit of a chef.
A little bit.
So what's your best dish?
Oh, man. All the above. I love to cook, and the best dish is the most recent one I did. But I love cooking for friends and family.
Do you have any particularly good campfire recipes that might work around a campfire at Johnson Creek?
I do. There is an incredible sandwich introduced to me by the Bachelor family of Colorado. They were former Cub guys, and now Lawson Bachelor is a CFI out in Montana. One of my best friends, and they have this little sandwich maker that you can fill with Nutella and bananas and honey, and you cast 2 pieces of white bread together and stick it in the fire for about a minute. Pull it out. That's the best campfire recipe. Simplicity matters.
That sounds great. All right. I know another interest of yours is architecture. So give me one of your favorite buildings and what the closest airport is that I can use if I want to fly in and see it.
Frank Lloyd Wright, Falling Water. And I don't know what the closest airport would be. Oh, man. Or, and you know what? We're going to circle back to it. Crystal Bridges in Bentonville, Arkansas. Victor Bravo Tango. It's a beautiful art museum, Crystal Bridges. The Walton family did a fantastic job with that. That is a stunning piece of architecture.
Those are both great picks and great flying destinations. So excellent recommendations. All right. Our last question is always the same. You have one final flight. We want to know, what are you flying and where are you going?
Like father, like son. It's my Carbon Cub, and it's the flight into Oshkosh. There is nothing that beats the palpable energy of when your wheels touch the ground on the dot at Oshkosh, and for just a moment you feel like an airshow pilot, getting in the conga line and rocking your wing, the entire experience. If that's my last flight, then I'd be pretty content with that, which is also foreshadowing for my submission this year into the Richard Collins writing contest.
Clay, thanks again for being on the podcast. And again, for anyone listening who wants to enter in the Richard Collins Writing Prize for Young Pilots, check out airfaxjournal.com for entry instructions. Clay, thanks again.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporties, training and equipping pilots worldwide for over 60 years. For more episodes and today's show links, visit sporties.com/podcast. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.